Hi, and welcome to the channel. Here, I share Scareful stories, and today I thought I would share a little different kind of a story. Not a true crime story, but more a story of how people with true crime fascinations, how their brains work in everyday interactions. I think most of us who are interested in missing persons or murder cases tend to think that we have that moment where we think, oh my gosh, if my spouse or somebody I'm close to ever goes missing or turns up murdered, that my internet search history will not look good for me. And that we kind of laugh and joke about kind of those kinds of instances where we realize that what we watch affects kind of our day-to-day lives and how our brains work. And so I was home alone, working from home the other day when somebody knocked on the door. And at first I just kind of ignored it, but then they knocked again and they knocked harder and a little more urgently. And I thought to myself, oh yeah, they can probably see that I'm home. Through the front window of the front door, they can probably see my arm and the chair that I'm sitting in. And so they're probably knocking more because they're like, hey lady, I can see you. I know you're home. So I actually get up and I go to answer the door. And the first thing I kind of do wrong is I actually open the door so that then there is only the screen door between me and the person. And I realize as I'm opening it that if my kids ever did something like this, I would be really, really upset because I always tell them you can talk to the person through the door. You don't need to open it. And when I open it, I see that it's a man and he's maybe my height or slightly taller. So maybe he's 5'7" or 5'8", and he's wearing a yellow fluorescent work vest and it has the utility company logo on it. He also has a hat with the utility logo on it. So I realized that, oh, this guy works for the electric company, or does he? Did he just get those clothes somewhere and it's fake so that he has a really good kind of disguise to get in my house? So I look on the street and I don't see a work van anywhere or a car anywhere. But even when I'm thinking about how I don't see it, I'm thinking, well, what would that mean anyway? The guy could just get a decal and stick it on his car and make it look like a work car, right? So all of that goes through my brain in like 1 second. And I size him up a little bit and I'm like, well, he's maybe well into his 60s, so he's older than me. He is rather small framed and skinny. So I probably am stronger than him, but maybe not because he's a man and men are kind of on average naturally stronger than women. So I really probably shouldn't think that just because maybe I weigh more than him or I'm not much shorter than him, that he wouldn't be able to kind of overpower me. He probably would. But I'm thinking that, and then I realize as I kind of look at him and he kind of shifts his weight on his legs, it almost looks like one of his legs is either shorter than the other one or bent a little funny. And so I'm thinking to myself that whatever is up with his leg might make him physically less able to overpower me. But at the same time I'm thinking about true crime stories that I know about where people made themselves look more helpless than they are. So Ted Bundy would put kind of a fake cast on his arm so that women would feel like he was non-threatening. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what if that's fake? What if he doesn't have a limp? And what if his leg is fine and it's really strong? And then of course, I'm also thinking about that poor woman who was killed in the church and how the person who was walking around the church on video had kind of a really weird walk and kind of seemed to have a bit of like a bent leg. And that didn't stop that person from killing that woman. And all of that goes through my head in like literally a second or two. And it's going through my head as I'm opening the door to let him into my house. And I'm talking to him and he says he needs to come in to check the gas meter to make sure that it's not leaking. And I kind of question that and say, well, do you really need to get in the house? Yeah, I need to check your meter. It's in your basement. We read the meter from the outside of your house, but obviously if the meter's leaking, it's leaking gas into your basement. And so I start to open the door to let him in and I feel like a gut feeling that there's anything wrong with this guy. I just want to say that even though I'm doing everything wrong in this scenario, I think the biggest thing that people miss is that if they have a really bad gut feeling, to trust that gut feeling. So a guy offering to give you a ride and you kind of have a gut feeling that there's something not quite right about it, don't get in the car. If an elevator door opens and there's a single guy in there and there's something that feels wrong about that to you, don't get in the elevator. I think there's a lot of instances where we do have like a really bad gut feeling and we don't trust it because we're like, well, what's going to happen? And so I just want to say I didn't have that gut feeling with this person. More, everything was running through my head of every single true crime story I've ever watched about some poor woman getting murdered in her home. And I'm thinking, I'm an idiot for letting this person in my house. But I do let him in, but I am smart enough to let him go in front of me. So I am behind him the entire time. And going back to like the idea of the elevator, this is something that I always do. If I'm in an elevator and somebody gets in there with me, I always back up to the back of the elevator to create space between us, but also so that they're never behind me. And when I'm in an elevator alone with a man and we both are going to get off on the same floor, I never exit the elevator first. If there were people standing there like waiting to get on the elevator, I would exit it, because what is he going to do in front of all these witnesses? But if it's empty when the door opens and there's nobody there, even if he gestures me to go first, which I sometimes think men are just trying to be nice and courteous, and you're the woman, you go ahead of me. And I think they're probably not realizing what an unsafe position that puts a woman in, and it makes you very vulnerable to be in front of a man. He could easily grab you from behind and drag you back into that elevator where you have no means of escape and less room to even get away from somebody or defend yourself. So for the men in the audience, if a woman has ever declined that courtesy, that's probably why. And for the women in the audience who leave first, maybe now I've given you something that's going to go through your head and you're going to think, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't go first. So I do let him go first, and I direct him down into the basement, and I follow him down there, which now when I think about that, I'm thinking, why did I follow him down there? He could have easily found the gas meter without my help. My basement's not that big. And I'm thinking I probably should have stayed upstairs in the kitchen where there's knives. But instead, I follow him down there and he finds the meter and he's checking it, and we're having a really nice chat, kind of just making small talk with one another. But he's very nice and he seems very friendly. And as I'm standing there, I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, I remember that story of the poor woman who she left her 2-year-old upstairs in her apartment, and she went downstairs to do laundry, and she never came back up because she was attacked and murdered in her basement. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to die in my basement. And then I'm thinking about how messy my basement is and how I don't want to die in my messy basement. And I'm making excuses to the electrical guy about why my basement's so messy, which what does he care? He doesn't care. He's probably seen way worse basements than mine. But yet I think we feel we have to have these kind of like social interactions with people where we're making excuses for certain things, which is probably why I went down in the basement to begin with, because I wanted to kind of make an excuse for why it was so messy. But I'm thinking about that poor woman who was murdered, but I'm also thinking, oh, but at least if I'm murdered like here in my house, my husband is 6 hours away and he's teaching a class, and so he has a definite alibi, like 100% total alibi of where he was, and there's no way there would have been enough time for him to sneak back home. It's not like he works, 15 minutes away from our house. He works 6 hours away from our house. And so I'm thinking, well, at least my husband won't be accused of murdering me and put in prison for something he didn't do. And all of that is going through my mind while I'm having this totally nice conversation with this man. And so then we do have a little awkward interaction where he kind of motions for me to go up the stairs first because he's done. And I'm kind of like, no, you go first. And I follow him back up and out of the house. And he was so nice that I just want to be clear, clearly not a mugger, a rapist, or a murderer. And that he was even nice enough that when we get back upstairs, somebody has dropped off a package on the porch, and he was kind enough to lift that up for me and offered to bring it in the house, but I just took it from him and brought it in the house. And as he was leaving, I did kind of step out on the porch and I saw the car parked up the street, which was a work van. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this man was so nice. And here I was having all these awful thoughts about how maybe he was a murderer. But really, it was just more thoughts of, I've spent a lifetime being interested in true crime stories. And that lifetime of interest in true crime stories really changes how you think about even these kind of small interactions. And in a way, I think maybe it makes some of us more tuned into things that could go wrong, but sometimes in kind of a way of, wow, my brain is really working in a crazy manner. So I just thought it was kind of a goofy story of how those of us who are true crime fans, how our brains actually work. And I thought it would be interesting to find out if any of you have ever had those kinds of interactions where they're totally normal, nice interactions, but you are thinking all these kind of true crime thoughts are running through your brain. Or if you've had interactions where you do get kind of that gut feeling feeling of this isn't right, and that knowing all these other stories has really helped you trust your gut and not interact with that person anymore. Let me know in the comments down below, and until next time, stay safe and stay careful.